Everyone, I'm Leanne.
And I'm Mischievous Mike.
And this is Unschooled History.
Hey, Leanne.
Yeah.
What do you get if you kneel on frozen water?
I don't know what.
The Iceni. Iceni.
Wow. Okay, bad jokes aside, that's actually really appropriate because today we are talking about Boudicca. Okay, so as Shakespeare said, what's in a name? Boudicca's name had several spellings and even alternate pronunciations, such as Budig, Boadicea, Boudicca. But Boudicca is the name we have from Tacitus, who was a Roman scholar and philosopher who was writing at the time.
I've heard of him.
You've heard of Tacitus?
Yeah.
I mean, he was kind of along the lines of Pliny the Elder, Pliny the Younger.
Oh, I know Pliny, especially Pliny the Elder.
Well, Pliny the Elder died because he was that curious about what was going on and trying to record everything. And we know that because Pliny the Younger, his nephew, wrote all about how his curiosity got him killed.
Yeah. But Pliny the Elder I know for In Vino Veritas.
Of course you know him for In Vino Veritas. Well, today we're talking about information we have from Tacitus.
Yes.
Who was actually writing about 30 years or so before the Plinies were.
Okay.
And Boudicca's name likely means victory, which is kind of cool considering what she did.
Yes.
You made a joke about Iceni.
Hmm?
Okay, well, Boudicca was queen of the Iceni. Well, that is the popular pronunciation, Iceni, which is why your joke works. You have the popular pronunciation. But it's actually pronounced Iceni.
Yeah. I've heard that, but
Iceni is easier for you, isn't it?
it's easier and it's easier to remember because you have certain singers in their songs, performers in their songs.
Yeah, we'll be talking about them later.
Yeah.
But it's correctly pronounced Iceni. Unless you're getting really technical with your Latin, in which case it's Iceni.
I didn't realize that was the Latin name.
Yeah.
I thought it was the Celtic name.
Oh, no. In fact, there is some speculation that the Iceni were not even Celts.
Bloody hell.
There's some evidence that they are actually more closely related to the Germanic Gauls than to the Celtic peoples.
Oh, bloody hell.
Okay, but this is the tribe that Boudicca led with her husband, Prasutagus. They were a Brythonic tribe living in the area around modern-day Norfolk, Suffolk, and Cambridgeshire, as far back as the Iron Age. On the map, you can see a small gold arrow pointing to the approximate location of their capital, Venta Icenorum, at modern-day Caister St. Edmund. Archaeological evidence for the Iceni include coins, which they started making around approximately 10 BC, and torques, which are heavy metal necklaces.
I've worn a torque.
You wore one for our wedding.
Yeah.
And it looked really, really good on you. Do you still have it? What happened to it?
Yes, I do. I still got it in a drawer.
Okay, awesome. Like many Iron Age tribes, the Iceni were largely agricultural. They had a pottery trade, and there's evidence that they also traded in wool. This isn't surprising, as most of their clothes would have been made from wool or leather. And in fact, in the picture showing some of them, okay, that's not really members of the Iceni tribe. That's a still taken from the Horrible Histories video on Boudicca, but it's somewhat accurate, believe it or not. You've got the woad. I'm assuming that's not real woad, because you and I both know what woad does, don't we, honey?
Oh, yeah.
It actually makes you hallucinate, doesn't it?
A little hallucinate makes you hyper aggressive, increases your stamina. It's for lack of a better word, it's sort of like a super steroid, but it makes you harder than heck to kill.
Yes, and that's why the Celts were so scary to the Romans, and that is why they built Hadrian's Wall. But what you see Boudica wearing in the image, she's wearing a tunic, but she's also wearing a cape, also known as an airsaid, which would have been belted around her and could be used as a cape, a skirt, a dress, or a blanket, which is really cool, and I want one.
I gotta say though the Celts used woad, woad was more correctly used by the Picts, which were further north.
Yes, up in Scotland.
Yes.
Okay, so the Iceni had a treaty with Rome. They signed this treaty in 40 AD. And in 47 AD, they rebelled. They were tired about being. They were tired of being. Oh, how do we want to put this?
A puppet?
What?
Being a puppet state?
Well, kind of a puppet state, being pawns,
Yeah.
having all their goods taken from them. Because Rome did not treat its allies very well, which is probably why they didn't have a lot of allies. So 47 AD, they rebel, the king dies, and Boudicca's husband, Prasutagus, becomes king. And he is a puppet, and he is very pro-Rome. So it was traditional for client kings of the Roman Empire to leave all of their land to the emperor when they died. Prasutagus didn't do this. Instead, he willed half of his land to the emperor and half to his two very young daughters.
I always thought he left half to his wife. Is that just legend, or is that a common misconception?
That is a common misconception. People think that it was left to his wife, but in reality, she was just acting as regent for their daughters because they were underage. Understand, they were under the age of 12, which was the lowest age of consent for the Roman Empire, even.
Okay.
And so she had to act as regent, which was fine because she even came from noble blood herself.
Okay.
So Rome obviously was not okay with this. The girls were underage, even by ancient Roman standards, not more than 12, which was the lowest age of consent for Rome. And that was the age of consent for sex and marriage for girls. On top of that, girls and women in ancient Rome could not own property. They were the property of their husbands, which is a huge difference between Rome and the Celts, because amongst the Celtic tribes and the Brittonic tribes and the Picts,
Weren't men and women equals?
they were equal. They were equal, they shared equally in the duties, and women were warriors just as much as men were. So, like I said, Rome wasn't happy. They weren't happy that Boudica would be reigning as a regent for her daughters. They weren't happy that they didn't get all of the land as was traditional and was as expected. So they took action, and it wasn't pretty. They had Boudica flogged, and then they gang raped her two daughters, right in front of her.
Now, do you know by chance if they flogged her in the traditional way with a leather whip, or if they actually used a scourge on her?
I'm not sure. I don't know. The one image that I could find shows a scourge, but I don't know. So here's the question. What's an Iceni queen to do after an insult like that? Roll over and take it? Bow down to the Romans?
Oh, hell no.
There's a reason they say that well-behaved women barely make history, and it certainly applied to Boudicca. The Celts held women in equal status with men, and women could and did fight. So Boudicca raised an army, and she didn't just gather up other members of her own tribe either.
Oh, yeah? Tell me more.
No, the Trinovantes to the south were just as mad as the Iceni, and they teamed up.
All right.
And they chose Boudicca to lead them. Tacitus records that she addressed her armies with these words. It is not as a woman descended from noble ancestry, but as one of the people that I am avenging lost freedom, my scourged body, the outraged chastity of my daughters. And concluded, this is a woman's resolve. As for men, they may live and be slaves. Now let's take a look at the path of destruction. First, they met the Ninth Legion at Comolodunum, which is now Colchester. Boudicca's army destroyed the city. They even decapitated a statue of Nero and kept the head as a trophy.
I guess you could say he lost his head.
I know, it's totally badass though, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's one way to keep ahead of the game.
Oh.
Yeah, I can play this game too, darling. On top of that, only the commander of the Ninth Legion and a few members of the cavalry escaped. All of the members of the infantry dead.
Ooh, I guess you said they did horse around.
When news reached Suetonius, he hurried to London, then known as Londinium, but it was only to evacuate the city. Anyone who didn't get out on time was killed as Boudicca and her army burned it to the ground. This was followed by Verulamium, today known as St. Albans.
And if you listen to the Horrible History song, you'll hear about St. Albans.
Yes, you will. And they actually still have part of the old Roman city there at St. Albans. You can see it. It's kind of cool. The exact location of the final battle is not known, though many historians favor the point in the West Midlands shown on the map. What we know from Tacitus is that Suetonius rallied the 14th and 20th legions and surrounded Boudicca and her forces. As her armies fell and she saw what was waiting for her, Boudicca, in a final FU to the Romans, took poison instead of allowing them to further torture her.
Well, we know that the Romans would have really made her an example of her. She would have been tortured for what she did to the Roman soldiers. She would have been tortured because she was a woman who dared to stand up against them. She would have been made an example of for being a woman who dared to assume power over men. They would have made an example of her for everything. And if she dared to raise a hand to a Roman soldier, there's another thing she'd be made an example of. And a woman holding a weapon.
Oh, how dare she?
Yeah, they would have done that, and they would have, each one would have been another excuse for a different type of torture to be drug out and made an example of, and to prolong her death.
And they probably would have done it in front of her daughters who were with her. I mean, today we would call what she did child endangerment, but back then that was perfectly normal for a warrior's family to go on the warpath with them, especially for the Celts.
Yeah.
And her daughters were going to grow up to be warriors just like her.
Yeah.
That was perfectly normal. They would have had training the whole way through.
Yeah.
And who knows what would have happened to her daughters as well. Probably the same thing that happened to them right after their father had died.
Yep.
And I wouldn't be surprised if they also took the poison. And we don't know where she's buried.
There are several theoretical locations.
Probably the most famous is between platforms 9 and 10 at King's Cross Station. Harry Potter fans, you will know this as platforms 9 and 3/4. But actually, it's not likely that Boudicca was buried there. The idea that she might have been buried there came up post World War II, and it's not likely. There's no evidence whatsoever that she was buried there. And it could have happened at any point along the way that she was traveling, most of which was along the old Roman road that is currently known as Watling Street, which actually goes pretty much the entire length between London and the final battle site. And actually starts a little further southeast of London near Dover, which is kind of cool that this old Roman road is still being used. So we don't know where she was buried. There are some reports that say she took poison and was just left to die and was buried in a mass pit. Some say that she was taken back home and given a lavish funeral, which is not likely because Tacitus reports that every single one of her people was slaughtered. Although there are rumors that her tribe survived for a little while at least in the fens, because apparently some monk reported being attacked by them.
Huh.
But I don't think that actually happened. There's no actual recorded information on that. There's no evidence whatsoever that they survived beyond that final battle.
It is, however, still wonderful to think about it and think that they could have. But she probably would have been buried in obscurity if there was time to properly bury her so that the Romans couldn't desecrate her body as revenge after her death.
And even if we were to find her grave today, there'd be no way of knowing it because there are no surviving descendants of the Iceni to test DNA against. So we don't know. All right, now let's talk about Boudicca's legacy. Obviously, she left behind a hell of a legacy, or we wouldn't be talking about her. She inspired songs, movies, TV shows, and books. Even her daughters inspired a book. The BBC series Horrible Histories did a great video on her, but that's not a surprise. We love the whole series, don't we, honey?
Oh, yeah. They do fantastic jobs on British history, and they do touch on some American history, but it's mostly British history.
Well, they also did Awful Egyptians.
Yeah.
And they did one on the Romans.
Yeah. They touch on a little bit of world history.
But it's almost exclusively British history.
Or something that the British have had an influence on or with. Or have had an influence on British history.
It's great for kids. It really is. If you've got younger kids, probably about 10, 11, 12, it's aimed at that age range.
Or if you want to learn something about history and have a good laugh yourself in the process.
Oh, yeah.
It'll make you ask more questions.
It does. One of our favorite artists, Steve McDonald, did an amazing song about her called Boudicca. It's on his Sons of Summerled album. There are statues. The one pictured here is her in her chariot with her daughters. Shakespeare's younger contemporaries, Francis Beaumont and John Fletcher, wrote a play about her. William Cowper wrote a gorgeous poem about her in 1781. Tennyson wrote a poem about her. Queen Victoria was viewed as Boudicca's namesake and successor because their names have the same meaning. Ships were named after her by the British Empire. So the same people who would have destroyed her now see her as a folk hero. Guys, Boudicca is truly a British folk hero, and unlike other British folk tales, like Robin Hood or King Arthur, we know exactly who she was and what she did, and that she was definitely a real person. See, we don't know about the other two. We don't. There is some evidence that there might have been a Robin of Locksley who might have been in trouble with the Sheriff of Nottingham. But we don't know any more beyond what the legends tell us. There are theories that King Arthur might have been a Roman legionnaire or a Roman commander in Britain, but we don't know. It's just legend. Boudicca, we know a lot more about, and we have so much more information on her. We hope you enjoyed this video about Boudicca. If you have anything in history that you want to know more about, drop it in the comments. As always, if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and make sure you like the Facebook page, the link to which is in the description.
And have a good day.